Despite the fact that the Avenger movies have been really popular this last decade, and Phase 3 ended on a record high note, there doesn't seem to be a lot of people who are excited about Phase 4. And why is that? Is that because fans are tired of the Avenger movies? No, I would say that that's not the case. I mean, Endgame was only a year ago, and that movie was a record-setting movie as far as box office returns. In Spider-Man Far From Home, what's considered Phase 3 technically, it's really not Phase 3 or Phase 4. It's just sort of like an in-the-middle chapter, just sort of a miscellaneous story. It did very well in the box office. Usually when fans get tired of a series, you'll start to see movies in that series flop, which we haven't really seen yet with the Avenger franchise. So why isn't enthusiasm high for Phase 4? Is it the rumors that Phase 4 is going to be a highly woke chapter in the Avengers saga? After all, regardless of what your feelings are about movies that try to be very progressive or woke, whether you think that's a really good thing or you think they're just doing it to cater to a certain political audience, there is the fact so far most of the movies that have tried to do that have not done financially very well. So that would suggest that public opinion would be moderate at best if indeed the next phase is going to be a highly woke series. But Captain Marvel was considered a woke movie and it did very well. And the creative team behind the MCU has garnished a lot of goodwill towards its fan base, which at this point is like half the planet, so I don't think that people are too worried about them delivering bad movies just because they want to be more progressive. I mean, yeah, there are some people who are going to say that. But on the whole, no, I don't think that has anything to do with the lack of enthusiasm. Okay, so enthusiasm still seems down. Then what is it then? Perhaps it's the lineup of the movies they got coming up. Let's take a look at this. So you got Black Widow, which is a character people have really wanted to see in her own movie for a long time. But now she's dead, and so this movie seems like more of an afterthought. So enthusiasm around it has been curbed with the fact she didn't survive Endgame. Then you've got Eternals and the Master of Kung Fu getting movies. Have those series even had comics since the 70s? The last time I ever remember seeing an Eternals book was like mid-early 80s, and it didn't even sell very well. And I've been reading Marvel for decades. I'm very familiar with pretty much every aspect of Marvel, and I've hardly seen anything Eternal in my time because nobody cares. And the same with Master of Kung Fu. I can't remember how long it's been since I saw him in a series. I mean, just appearing in a series, much less even having a zone. We're talking for the comics here. So the fact that they're going to make those two like sort of the next two breakout movies. Now, I know some people said, yeah, well, Guardians wasn't really anything until they did movie 2. Yeah, and that's kind of true. But the Guardians were actually starting to make a big comeback in the comic right before the movie anyway. But let's concede the point and say that people didn't really care about Guardians of the Galaxy before 2014. And it's more to the point that, yeah, maybe that's not reason that enthusiasm is low for the upcoming movies. Again, because they've been able to take characters people have not really cared too much about at the time, such as the Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man. You know, he's a long-standing character, but he's never been a really popular character. And both those did well enough to have sequels. And as far as I understand, they will have a third chapter on each. Again, I think this goes back to the goodwill, that the fans have enough goodwill towards the creators that they're going to trust, even if they don't really know the characters, that they'll make them interesting and it'll be a fun movie to watch all the same. So now I'm going to say that I think that does actually factor into some of the downed enthusiasm that they're doing that. So I'm going to say that this is a yes and a no. I'm going to say it's not the main reason, but I'm going to say it's probably the number 2 reason. If it's not the main reason, then if there is a lot of goodwill and people are willing to give these lesser-known characters a chance in the movies, why is enthusiasm so low? I've wondered that for a while, and I got the answer to my own question the other night. Since the Black Widow movie didn't come out this month because of the pandemic, I decided to rewatch Endgame, something I hadn't done actually since the opening night it came out in theaters. Really liked the movie, but it's a 3-hour movie. I just never really had time to watch it again in the last year, so I said, hey, why not? Let's watch this movie. And both times I've seen the movie, when you get to the end credits, I had the same emotional reaction, and both times my first thought to the reaction was, what a perfect ending. The series is now truly over. There's never been a series of movies that have been as epic in scope and in cast as the Avenger movies. Even the James Bond movies, which have spanned decades and have been iconic, have really just been a series of one-off movies. And even some of the actors who played James Bond never really went on to do much after their time as the 00 agent. So in that regard, the Avenger movies gave us something that was new and rich. And the fact they covered so many movies in such a short period of time, I mean, you're looking at 11 years from Iron Man to Endgame, which doesn't seem like necessarily a short amount of period, but when you consider that there have been 20 plus movies in that amount of time, oh yeah, that's a lot of film for a single decade. And being that comic book storylines are really never ending. I mean, you have an adventure that ends, but comic books are always ongoing. It's not necessarily a story of how does Spider-Man beat the Green Goblin. It's really a story of what is Spider-Man's life as Peter Parker and as a superhero having to constantly fight all these dangers and try to live a normal life. And there is no end to that story unless they kill the character or retire the character somehow, but they don't want to do that because that's dollars lost if they do. So then doesn't it make sense that you'd want to continue with what they're doing in the Avengers movies and just, have the next decade have another 20 movies? Financially, yes, it actually does. But I want to lay that point aside and come back to that later. The thing about Endgame is it was really written as an ending. Not just an ending to the phase, but an ending to the Avengers series as we knew it. And I believe that was the right move. I believe the series really needed it at that point in time. Not because I was tired of the Avengers movies, but the fact is you're dealing with a very different medium than comics. After all, live action isn't comic books. Despite how you may try to capture much of the feel and the look, the types of stories, it's a whole different medium. For example, in comic books, you can have half a century go by and have your characters only age, say, 5 or 10 years. And it's easy to do simply because you're drawing the characters, so you can make them look however you want. You don't have to age the characters if you don't want to age the characters. But actors are going to age. I mean, even for characters that are largely CG, like Rocket, Bradley Cooper is not going to live forever. He's not going to want to do Rocket forever. And, his voice acting brings a lot to the character, so he retires, the character's not going to be the same anymore. So at some point, because the actors have to stop, the characters have to stop. Now, sure, there is the option for recasting. They already did that with the Hulk. But part of what makes the MCU so great is how we've attached ourselves to the characters as portrayed by these different actors. And having a new Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, or Thor, I think would only really work in a reboot situation. So it's not surprising that the directors and producers of the MCU movies decided that Endgame was the perfect time to retire many key characters and bring the story to a certain logical conclusion. And they did too good of a job at that, if you ask me. Despite the fact that they did some setting up for future movies or possibly TV shows, such as, giving Sam Wilson Captain America's shield, Thor going off with the Guardians of the Galaxy, Valkyrie becoming the new Queen of the Asgardians. The movie felt like such an ending that I couldn't look at these setups at the end of the movie and think of these as new beginnings. To me, to have the series go on at this point, it just felt like it cheapens the ending of Endgame. And I think, maybe not on a conscious level, but I think on a subconscious level, a lot of people feel the same way. They were very satisfied with how the movie ended and how the series ended. And the fact that, certain key characters aren't coming back, it seems like a good place to call it a wrap. And then if you throw in that number 2 reason I mentioned about enthusiasm being low, the fact that, then suddenly you're going from such a great epic ending and guess what's next? Oh, a bunch of people you've never heard of. I mean, I think it just really took in the winds out of the sails for the Avengers movies. I think the best thing for the Avengers movies, both as a story and as an art form at this point, would be to retire the series after Endgame. You can still do more Avengers movies. It's called a reboot. Reboots haven't always been bad. Superhero movies, it's been a real mixed bag, but that's just like anything. After all, Batman Begins and Dark Knight was a reboot from the Joel Schumacher movies, and that was hugely successful. It really just matters, are the movies good movies or not? If you're going to reboot it with a bunch of garbage, that's might as well just not make any more movies. But I understand the reason for not doing a reboot. It's because, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, financial. Those movies just made too much money for them to walk away from this. A reboot could be just as much a jumping off point as it could be a jumping on point for people. So it's a lot more risky. But since the Avengers movies, or this current line of Avengers movies did so well, they're pretty much guaranteed the next 3 or 4 movies could just be utter garbage. They're going to make money. Now, if they are utter garbage, then I think because people were satisfied with the end of Endgame, they'll quickly see a decline in the movies. By 2022, no one's going to care anymore. But they still got a couple years left that they can make billions of dollars off this series. So why would you walk away from that? The only reason you would be to respect the art form, which seems like plenty of reason enough. But again, these are companies. They're not worried about art. They're worried about money. Perhaps if the company was run by an artist, for example, George Lucas with Star Wars, George Lucas had a vision for Star Wars. He did what he wanted to do. He didn't just try to pump out a bunch of movies. But Disney is not an individual. It's a corporation. And corporations' jobs are to make money. So can't really fault them there. Still, it's a shame. Really think that they delivered us a perfect ending, and I'm really grateful for that. So I guess no matter what happens next, we can always say, well, we had the first 3 phases. Anyway, that's just some thoughts I want to share. Do y'all agree with my reasoning? Do you think that, first of all, do you think enthusiasm is low? It just definitely seems that way to me. And if you do agree that it is low, do you agree with my reasoning for why it's low? Leave your comments below and let me know what you think. Oh, and like the channel and subscribe if you want to hear more. And I will talk to you later. Bye.